Hi, I'm Anthony.
And I'm Nicole.
And this is
Life with
Twins.
Twins.
And the reason I'm wearing this mask, for those of you wondering, while we're inside of our own house, I shaved my mustache and it looks terrible. And I don't want you guys to be distracted by this. You'll get over the mask really shortly. So
he doesn't want himself to be distracted.
I don't. I will be staring at it.
That is the main problem.
I'm not a fan. So anyways, last episode we talked a little bit about your horrible C-section that you had to go through. So this episode we're going to tell you guys a little bit about the experiences we had while in the hospital while going through a pandemic and how they handled COVID. So take it away.
So the boys were born at 36 weeks, really close to 37 weeks, but they were still considered late preterm. I had a terrible C-section, which meant that they gave me some medications to lightly sedate me. I also had preeclampsia, which was the whole reason why we got induced in the first place. So that means in recovery after having my twins, I was very out of it. I was coming out of the medications from the C-section, and I was also being started on magnesium, which kind of makes you feel drunk. I was on magnesium for a full 24 hours, so that whole first 24 hours, I felt like I was a drunk. I'm like walking with my IV pole like this down the hallway, like knowing what was going on with the babies, and kind of understanding like from start to finish, what they were going through. I know, that because they were born prematurely and because Maverick was so little that they had to get blood sugars, and their initial blood sugars were low. And so they, give them some breast milk, they top off formula, and they give them some gel, and that should help boost up their blood sugars. And it did initially, but they do have to check it again in like 4 hours after that. So by that time, we're up in our room, we're bonding with the babies, having so much fun.
It was a blast. One thing I will say specifically about that part of it was when they first came out. I mean, from a guy's perspective, it was super weird because they're just these little creatures, and I know you're supposed to love them, but it was like they were just there. They were beings. Yeah, and it was just like such a weird feeling to look at, and I was like, I like them, but I'm not like super into them.
In love with them.
Yeah, and Nicole was like making me kind of feel bad because she was so into them, so that was just one part that.
Well, I did grow them.
Yeah, so it kind of goes away eventually, but for those of any guy that's wondering, like, I definitely had that feeling. Yeah.
So when we got up to our room, they had to check their blood sugars again, and unfortunately, I think both of them were low. So they both had to get gel. However, Hayden's came up. Maverick stayed exactly the same. So we gave him gel, we gave him breast milk, we gave him formula, and his ended up being exactly the same. And so he unfortunately had to go down to the nursery. And so in the nursery, they had to start an IV on him. And that took forever. He had to unfortunately get poked so many times. And I remember going down there like 30 minutes after he had already been down there, and he still hadn't gotten an IV. And I was just so sad for him because his blood sugar was low, and he was literally like limp because, he was born early, he was fresh, and he's got a low blood sugar.
Yeah. So plus he was super ugly, so that also made us feel bad too.
So that made him feel really bad.
No, it made me feel bad for him.
I know. He was just like this little scrawny guy. And I just felt so bad, and I was just like, can we please get someone over here now so that he can get some sugar in him because he's like dead fish. Mm-hmm. Like, please give him life. Mm-hmm. And so they finally had to get somebody from the NICU, and I think they even had to try a couple times in order to get an IV in him, and they finally did, and it was in his leg, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was rough.
So that was a little awkward when we were holding him, but he got some IV sugar, and essentially they just gave him enough to where he was able to have his blood sugar stabilized, and then every time he would eat, they would check his blood sugar, and they had a little algorithm, and depending on what his blood sugar was is what they could adjust his IV sugar to. And so eventually it took like a couple days, but they were able to get him off of that. But then we started developing problems with feeding. So both of our boys had problems with feeding. I had no idea that this was a thing, but they developed their suck in in the 36 week to 37 week mark. And so them being born at 36 and 4 weeks, they were like right on the end of learning to develop how to suck. And so being born at that time, I guess they really struggled. They were like, you put the bottle in Hayden's mouth and he's like, And it's like, dude, just close your mouth. And then you're like, gag. And he would do that with the nipple too. So it wouldn't matter if it was bottle or my breast. He like did the same thing. And then Mav, you put the bottle in his mouth and he's just like. And so they like the nurses teach you all these tricks, like, oh, massage their cheeks and lift up their chin and like doing all these things to try to stimulate them to eat. And it would take so much work to get them like the minimum amount that they had to eat. I mean, Hayden had to eat 20 milliliters and I could get him to eat 12, like to 15 every feed. And it would be a miracle if I could get him to eat 20. And so we tried that for like, I don't know, 24 hours. And eventually the nurse came in because I'm like crying because I hadn't gotten any sleep. Like I've been getting an hour of sleep because I would go downstairs to feed Maverick. Then I would come upstairs to feed Hayden, and then I would pump, and then it'd be the time to go see Maverick again. The unfortunate thing about having babies in a pandemic is we only got to visit them every other time. So, like, only one parent could be down in the nursery at a time. And so if I wasn't feeding Maverick, then, you know, Anthony was feeding Maverick. And so we had to, like, take turns. So I felt very disconnected to Maverick in the beginning and being, you know, full of emotions. Every time I'd go see Maverick, I would cry and just be like, I don't even know who you are. And the nurses would ask me and be like, how did his feedings go? Like, how is he doing? And I'm like, I don't even know this baby. Like, meanwhile, I'm upstairs, like, bonding with his brother, doing skin to skin, feeding him, hanging out with him, changing his diaper all day, like, and I only get to see Maverick, like, 4 or 5 times. So I felt, like, extreme mom guilt with that. But anyways, the nurse came in after we've been trying to feed Hayden, you know, forever, and he wasn't tolerating it. She came in and she sat me down and she was just like, look, it's not a bad thing to have him go to the nursery. If he goes to the nursery, then you get both of your babies down there. Yeah. And if they are both down there, then both of you guys can go down there together. And then you can come upstairs and you don't have a baby to take care of and you can just sleep. And I was like, oh, that sounds so amazing. Why have I been delaying this? Like, why have I been trying so hard to get Hayden to eat his bottle? Like, having them both down there just seems amazing. And so we finally decided that we were done trying to get Hayden to eat the bottle, and that we were just going to send him down. And so both of our boys were down in the nursery. They both had a feeding tube. And so basically we would offer them the bottle first. So whatever I ended up pumping, they would eat, and then they would supplement the rest with formula because I wasn't pumping enough for them. And then whatever they didn't eat from the formula with the bottle, it would go in the feeding tube. And eventually it became less and less and less that they were needing the feeding tube for. And then once they were eating the majority of their feeds through the bottle, then we just kind of did an ad lib thing. So we would give them whatever they wanted through the bottle, and if they met their goal, great. If they didn't, that's okay. We wouldn't supplement through the feeding tube. We did that for a 24-hour period, and then that night we would weigh them, and if they were gaining weight, then the tube could come out.
Right.
And so Maverick was a champ. He was way ahead of Hayden by a day.
Oh, yeah. He
had his feeding tube pulled, and then Hayden ended up pulling his out later that night. Yep. But he wasn't quite ready for it yet. But the doctor was like, we don't need to put it in him. We'll just kind of see how it goes by just doing an ad lib thing with him. And so both of our boys ended up gaining weight. We ended up having the tubes out. And so then it was time to go home. But we didn't get discharged till June 9th, and they were born June 1st.
So, yeah, being in a hospital that long, it's terrible.
Oh, especially in a pandemic, because you can't have people come in and see you. Thankfully, we delivered at my hospital, so we were able to have, you know, my coworkers come by, drop off Starbucks, drop off food. You know, they would order food and text me and be like,
guys.
Yes, thank you. They would order food and text me and ask if we wanted to be part of their order. So that was very nice. And just being able to, like, kind of walk around and say hi to them and see what they're doing, you know, that was really helpful. But yeah, having babies in a pandemic is hard, especially if you have one baby in the nursery. Having to split that time it is so hard, and it's so emotional, and you just feel like you're missing out on your baby's life. So yeah, that was very hard.
But what we're going to talk about next week is like coming home after the pandemic. And like one thing is that's really hard. We could not have anybody be near the babies because of COVID. We needed to wait till they pretty much got their shots. Or so I mean, we had to be quarantined hardcore with 2 babies and kind of no help. So, well,
we're still alive to live the tale.
Yeah,
so.
We'll tell you guys all about that on the next episode. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. Please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. And anybody that you know who is pregnant or having twins that has any interest in what's to come, please let them know.
Bye.
It's because I shaved off my mustache and I look terrible.
Basically, that first 24 hours, I don't really recall much. It felt like I was in a haze. Or is it days?
It's a haze.
Haze.
It also is, yeah. It
Days?
Also is dazed. Yeah, it is, yeah.
I was both.
She was hazy and daisy. Yes.
Hazy and daisy.
That's right. She was also acting really drunk and really, like,
no, it wasn't.
into me.
No.
So that was nice. She kept wanting another baby. But...
Yeah, you know. Immediately after a C-section, ripping twins out of me, having to be sedated. I was like, man, I can't wait to do this again. Let's have more babies. You gonna say your joke?
No.